What is going on, family? Book club time. Book club time for those of you who somehow, if you're here and you didn't read the book, of course, where do we go from here? Chaos or Community is the book. So, if you didn't read it, you still have a chance to read it on your own, in your own time, and you can come back here and watch the book club. But if you want to watch it and if you want to watch the book club and you didn't do that, you can do that too. We're gonna get into this kind of quick today, so just make sure you hit that like button for me. That's it. And also make sure if you haven't subscribed or you haven't hit the bell, hit that bell. That'll be great. So I want to get into something because there's a reason why I actually wanted the book read before the conference, because I think a lot of the questions raised in this book, or most of them, honestly, are still relevant. But even more than being relevant, what we're kind of left with here is that, for me, nearly all of these questions that were raised and brought up by MLK were either left unanswered or answered wrongly. Right? So I think what has to happen in terms of our leadership and in terms of leading the Black community, we have to revisit this text specifically and answer those questions right. And let me tell you, I don't want to hear from anybody tonight who's like, well, Martin was a blah, 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 and he wasn't this and he wasn't that. Like, if you take a bullet for the cause, that's it. I ain't never seen the people who criticize Martin ever get anyway, MLK ever get anywhere near doing any of that. So that's that for me. He was just all wrong, and he was. We can call it constructive criticism is always good, but don't call it a night with all this blathering what you would have done and what you could. Child, I know you wouldn't have did it then because you don't do it now. So let's get right to it. Ain't nothing to it but to do it. Put this right here. So we're going to go through so many quotes, fam, so many quotes. So let's start off with I'm going to start off with a series of themes. There were recurring themes in the book. And I want to start off with some of the themes. One of the themes that we still live with to a large extent today that MLK goes into is how much of the problem is whiteness, but not just whiteness in the sense of white conservatives or the Dixiecrats, but also white liberals and what they were willing to give up and what they were not willing to give up for our freedom. So you can go, we'll start off very early. Let's start off at page 3. If you would get your book out, family, please turn to page 3 for me. Because I think King sort of starts out in that direction. He talks about, and I'm looking at the last paragraph, but even when you get before the last paragraph on page 3, there's a line that talks about the public became infuriated and sympathy evaporated. And he says, with Selma and the Voting Rights Act, one phase of the development and civil rights revolution came to an end. A new phase opened. But few observers realized it or were prepared for its implications. For the vast majority of white Americans, the past decade, the first phase had been a struggle to treat the Negro with a degree of decency, not of equality. White America was ready to demand that the Negro should be spared the lash of brutality and coarse degradation, but it had never been truly committed to helping him out of poverty, exploitation, or all forms of discrimination. What MLK is saying right there is like, yeah, you want to tolerate us as long as it don't cost you nothing. It's kind of like what we say about giving up whiteness. You willing to do all, and you willing to say, yeah, don't beat them in the street like that. Don't do that. Don't do that to him. Don't take you see the Southerners, they take out the billy clubs on the Negroes. But they're willing to spare us that. But the next step of like the true cost of equality, when you have to funnel an immense amount of money to like make us whole in terms of, King was talking about the schools and the housing, that all costs money. When there was a cost to be paid, all that stuff fell down. And what you found is, go to page 5 for me. King said that white people were perfectly comfortable, or white America was perfectly comfortable with the status quo. They don't want to give up whiteness. So you go to the second paragraph, towards the middle of that paragraph on page 5, and it says, as the nation passes from opposing extremist behavior to the deeper and more pervasive elements of equality, white America reaffirms its bonds to the status quo. It had contemplated comfortably hugging the shoreline, but now fears that the winds of change are blowing it out to sea. You see? Don't want to give up whiteness. They're okay as long as they don't have a cost. King says in the next paragraph, there are no expenses and no taxes required for Negroes to share lunch at lunch counters, libraries, parks, hotels, and other facilities with whites. Even the psychological adjustment is far from formidable. So as long as you can do something that just like, okay, well, you can say, you know, you're sympathetic. I'm just fine. I'm perfectly fine. I will share a lunch counter with the Negro because I'm a decent white citizen. I will do that. Well, will you do the next thing though, in terms of giving back what has been taken and stolen? You don't want to do that. And we're kind of stuck there, it seems to me, in this space of white America wanting to say, yes, you're my equal, and I won't discriminate against you, and I won't condone any kind of discrimination. But when you talk about the money for that, then everything seems to fall apart. Let's keep it moving. You see the same thing on page, if you go to page 36, King has the same kind of sentiment that he expressed just then. He says, what is needed? Hold on, let me see if that's the right. Is that the right page? Page 36? Yep, that's the right. And he talks a little bit about, I just want to, because this is very important. And this is very important, not just in what King was saying about white America, but I think it goes to the white church, and even to a certain extent to the black church. When you talk about, you know, you have a lot of churches, well, we just do. It's kind of like, do you remember the guy who called in the other day? And he was talking about a spiritual church, and it's just a spiritual, the spirit and the spirit, and we don't delve into all of that. And King spoke to that directly in terms of the church being about power, or love being about power. Like you don't just say, well, we love you and we're not going to delve into power. They go hand in hand. And he said on page 36, that's that first paragraph on the, well, no, I'm sorry, that's page 38. On that first paragraph, he says, what is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and that love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. Justice at its best is love correcting everything that stands against love. They go hand in hand. You can't talk about love without talking about power, without talking about power, without talking about love. You cannot abdicate your responsibility and your need for power, because power determines how that pie is cut up and who gets who, what gets what, that's what determines it. And you can't say, well, you know, it's just about love and that's all we're going to do. We're not going to worry about power. As a matter of fact, when we go into this, King has a lot to say about power and how we have to not only just have representation. We can't just have representation to be in the and just be in Congress and have a black face. And he goes into, sometimes that face looks black, but it's been taken out of the community and it's just black on the outside, in the sense of the person who is there has been kind of remade by their paymasters. And he has a lot to say about that as well. So if you go to page, he wants a status quo. Okay, rich to be rich, Lord. And there's something that he said on page 6. And this is just a really, he said something, I'm not going to go read the quote, but he said, you know, you don't need the rich to give up everything. You need the rich just to be richer at a lower rate, at a slower rate, which goes to what we say about billionaires and stuff of that nature. When we talk about it in a general sense, you could just be rich slower. You can still have everything you want to need. Like how much does one have to have? But, you know, we tend to think, and I think we kind of lost this. This idea, and you see it even in terms of the implementation of after After integration, you saw a lot of places, a lot of states, a lot of state governments say, make me. Yeah, you want me to do it, make me. Andrew Jackson said the same thing when the Supreme Court, I think it was a ruling about the Native Americans. He said, yeah, okay, where's your army? And I think we don't understand that even after a law is passed, even after something happens, and it's, we say it's on the books, they got to do it. We see that now with voting, right? It's on the books that we can vote. How many states how many conservative states are suppressing votes of ADOS? How many? So it's funny to me. It's interesting to me how King kind of caught that very early and kind of projected it in a way in terms of the limitations of law. Like, law has to be backed by something. Like, it's a law, okay, we're going to make you do that law because you're not going to do it. You're not a good enough person or whatever to just do it on your own. We're pushing you in a specific direction. So even if you go to page 10 real quick. The legal structures have in practice proved to be neither structures nor law. The sparse and insufficient collection of statutes is not a structure. It is barely a naked framework. Legislation that is evaded, substantially nullified, and unenforced is a mockery of the law. Significant progress has effectively been barred by the cunning obstruction of segregationists. So you pass the law, you upend the law. And that's not the last time that he talks about that. If you go to page 167 towards the end, go to page 167. Okay. He says in the second paragraph, page 167, laws only declare rights, they do not deliver them. Laws only declare rights. They do not deliver them. The oppressed must take hold of laws and transform them into effective mandates. Hence, the absence of powerful organizations has limited the degree of application and the extent of practical success. Now, if that ain't a word, I don't know what y'all looking at. If that is not a word right there, go to page 87 real quick. Lot of good quotes in here. I was like, come on. Throughout laws again, second paragraph, this is first full paragraph, page 87. Throughout our history, laws affirming Negro rights have consistently been circumvented by ingenious evasions which tender them void in practice. Laws that affect the whole population, draft laws, income tax laws, traffic laws, manage to work even though they may be unpopular. But laws passed for the Negro's benefit are so widely unenforced that it is a mockery to call them laws. There is a tragic gulf between the civil rights laws passed and civil rights laws implemented. What? So you telling me the laws work for everybody else? So the way y'all do us, you pass laws, you just don't enforce. So we'll give the Negroes laws. We're gonna make all this stuff illegal and blah blah blah. You even see it with the what we talk about with the Carnell lawsuit or whatever. Yeah, we made all these laws, but we're not really into enforcing them. We're not really into that. We just gonna pass it and have it on the books. And then when you don't succeed, we'll say, we passed the law. What's wrong with y'all? Y'all lazy? Y'all got problems? Now he talked about MLK really went into the reasons for why we're pessimistic, right? Like why ADOS is experiencing the level of pessimism. And you still see it today. And he talked about that in a way that he saw a lot of the things that we're doing that look empowering. We've talked about it, that appear to be empowering are actually just expressions of pessimism. It's not really empowering at all. And he even had a problem with the Black Power movement. And he and King and Stokely Carmichael, there's a great, I'm not going to get into it in the book. I mean in the book club today, but him and Stokely, if somebody wants to bring it up on the call, you certainly can. But they had a great conversation, a great spirited debate about Black Power and the problems that King had with the slogan and the problem that he had with people who were using the slogan. First of all, he thought it was very reflexive. You just, because you just, it's just a reaction. It's just a reaction to white power. So I'm just kind of telling you what he said. And he said, you're kind of responding to the white gaze in a certain way. So your response is black power. And it makes white people feel that if we get something that we're going to dominate and be domineering over them and treat them the way that we've been treated. And it doesn't really serve the purpose that he wanted to serve. It's very interesting. It's a very, very, very interesting thing. So let me go to page, we'll first start at page 18 about that. Let's start at page 18 really quick. He says at the last paragraph on page 18, yet black power has proved to be a slogan without a program and with an uncertain following. If it is true that the controversy is not yet resolved, it is also true that no new alternatives to nonviolence within the movement have found viable expression. Confusion has been created, but extensive despair and dissipation of fighting strength have not occurred. Very interesting. And he also said something when people ask, like, well, why hasn't the civil rights movement done more? Why hasn't it been more effective? King had a very good answer. He said, the hard truth, go to page 20, the fourth paragraph to the bottom. And he says, the hard truth is not just about white America. He says, the hard truth is that neither Negro nor white has yet done enough to expect the dawn of a new day. While much has been done, it has been accomplished by too few and on a scale too limited for the breadth of the goal. Freedom is not won by passive acceptance of suffering. Freedom is won by a struggle against suffering. By this measure, Negroes have not yet paid the full price of freedom, and whites have not yet faced the full cost of justice. Ooh. Yeah, we ain't done enough either. We got too many people sitting around talking and playing armchair, pretending to be raceless people. And well, I tell you what, it can't be done. It just can't be done. Because King speaks also to doing the impossible. He says sometimes, depending on who you are, what group you're with, you have to do the impossible. That's part of your job. Didn't you know that? And you can't be asking why you got to do it, or Lord, why me? If the impossible is in front of you, that's what you got to do. And that's part of it too. He said all of that. Let me see. 18. Go to page 26. Which paragraph? Which paragraph on 26? Because we're still on black. We're still going to talk a bit about black power. Let me see. 26. He says bitterness has not the capacity to make the distinction between some and all. So I think the point that he's making is that, like, yeah, you can get enraged and you can have all of that, but like at the end of the day, what program? What else do you have? Go to page 48 for me real quick, because we're gonna add on to this a little bit. There's no way I'm gonna get through all these quotes. Page 48, the last paragraphs. He says, in any social revolution, there are times when the tailwinds of triumph and fulfillment favor us, and other times when strong headwinds of disappointment and setbacks beat against us relentlessly. We must not permit adverse winds to overwhelm us as we journey across the mighty Atlantic. We must be sustained by our energies of courage in spite of the winds. This refusal to be stopped, this determination to go on in spite of, is the hallmark of any great movement. The Black Power movement today, like the Garvey Back to Africa movement of the 1920s, represents a dashing of hope, a conviction of the inability of the Negro to win, and a belief in the infinitude of the ghetto. Go to the next paragraph. We'll skip this little part right here. Black power is an implicit and often explicit belief in black separatism. Now he was kind though. He said, I do not call it black racism. It is inaccurate to refer black power as racism in reverse, as some have recently done. But go to the next paragraph. Yet behind Black Power's legitimate and necessary concern for a group unity and Black identity lies the belief that there can be separate Black role to that there can be a separate Black role to power and fulfillment. Few ideas are more unrealistic. Ain't gonna happen. That's not the road. That's what King was. There is no separate road. There is not going to be any separatism. I don't know why people talk to me about, well, we just going to break off. Well, go on and break yourself off. And see how that works out. If you can't break yourself off, I don't know how you're going to break it. Like, it's kind of like this weird, fantastical space to be in. And he says this is King says, same paragraph. There is no salvation for the Negro through isolation. No salvation through isolation. No salvation through, I'm going to go over here and do it over here, and I'm going to have my own thing over here. And it has been tried. We've seen it tried. Not going to happen. So I found that very interesting. So much of what King said, like, we agreed on. And I was like, where'd that come from? Yep. Because I read this a long time ago. Now here's the kicker. Go to page 50. We're still on Black Power. We're finna move on. Oh, time flies. Go to Black Power, page 50, the next to last paragraph. Black power alone is no more insurance against social injustice than white power. Negro politicians can be as opportunistic as white counterparts if there is not an informed and determined constituency demanding social reform. What is most needed is a coalition of Negroes and liberal whites that will work to make both major parties truly responsive to the needs of the poor. Black power does not envision or desire such a program. I agree and disagree. Throughout this book, I think King showed, and I can't blame him. I don't know what I would have done in that era, in that time, in the 1960s and all that. I think he really was, even in the last chapter. I don't even think universal basic income. And it's funny, people always want to quote King on a guaranteed income, but they never want to quote him on reparations. That's always interesting. But I think he was making a play for, like, building a solidarity movement. What you find, though, what we have found is that, and I think it's hard to make it work, but I think King's talked about alliances and talked about how you have to be very specific in how you scrutinize alliances. You don't expect people to just come along. There has to be something in the deal for everybody, and that's how it has to work. And King was very, very, very specific about that. I don't think we scrutinize alliances really very much at all anymore. We just kind of say, well, that's the right thing. Sounds good. I'm in solidarity. I'm with them. And King spoke against assessing alliances in that way. That's a kind of pedestrian, young, infantile way to kind of assess political alliances. So let's go on. Let me see. He spoke about when you're talking about identity. Let me just go to page 130 really quick. Go to 130 for me. Now, who does this sound like? He talks about Black identity. He says they have a fantasy of a separate Black state or a separate Black nation within a nation. This approach is the most cynical and nihilistic of all because it is based on a loss of faith in the possibilities of American democracy. Either you get it here or you don't get it. Now, let me see. I think I had some. Okay. Page 131, the second from the next to last paragraph, 131. A second important step that the Negro must take is to work passionately for group identity. This does not mean group isolation or exclusivity. It means the kind of group consciousness that Negroes need in order to participate more meaningfully at all levels of the nations. We talk about group identity, don't we? Then he got into the Black middle class. Oh, he told them something about themselves. You know, it's not a class. It really never was. They was on the move then. It was a group of them. They was on the move. And then they tried to cleave off. We know them now as the boule. But black money don't last long anyway. But anyway, It was not but you have to understand, like, limitations of data during that period, and nobody knew they were going to close off the spigot. You had this group that was growing, and they were becoming stuff, and they had a little bit of money, and they were wearing furry clothes, and they thought they was doing it. So you will see. Hold on, let me see. Page 132. Too many Negro social and professional groups have degenerated into snobbishness and a preoccupation with frivolities and trivial activities. Sounds familiar. Let's keep it moving. Let's go to page 140. Did I get that right? It is especially important for the Negro middle class to join this action program, protesting, because he says protesting is not enough. Mass nonviolent demonstrations are great. He says, let me just go to that paragraph. The paragraph in the middle of page 139. But mass nonviolent demonstrations will not be enough. They must be supplemented by a continuing job of organization. To produce change, poor people must be organized to work together in units of power. These units may be political, as in the case of voters' leagues and political parties. They may be economic, as in the case of groups of tenants who join forces to form a union, or groups of the unemployed and underemployed who organize to get better jobs and wages. More and more, the civil rights movement will have to engage in the task of organizing people into permanent groups to protect their own interests and produce change in their belief. This task is tedious and lacks the drama of demonstrations, but it is necessary for meaningful results. It is especially important for the Negro middle class to join in this action program. To say that all too many members of the Negro middle class have been detached spectators rather than involved participants is the great drama of social change taking place on the stage of American history. Is not to overlook the unswerving dedication of unselfish service. Y'all snob. That's what he does. I didn't say it. I did not say anything of that nature. Now let's move. Let's go to page 133 and talk about overcoming. Were we on page 133 at one point? I'll see when I get there. Oh, he talked about power, like how government is important. You know how people say we can't depend on. Go to the next to the last paragraph on page 133. While ignoring midways through, while not ignoring the fact that the ultimate way to diminish our problems of crime, family disorganization, illegitimacy, and so forth will have to be found through a government program to help the frustrated Negro. They talk about male, find himself. Does that sound like when we talk about, what do you think it is? Find himself, his masculinity, all of that. Government programs. Solidarity. He also talks about the limitations of violence. And we have to talk about that too, because we still have people talking about it's a fool's errand. And I mean, I know none of us feel that way, but I just, sometimes you see people in the comments say stupid stuff and you rebuke it and say that's just stupid and it's immoral or whatever, but you have to also understand why what you said was so stupid. Like, you just stuck on that. So let's go to page 58 for just one quick second, because I just saw I had that here. Oh, it's a lot on page 58. It's a lot on here. Cause let's go to a different direction. Let's go to Pan-Africanism while I'm over here and all this stuff. One of the main questions that the Negro must confront in his pursuit of freedom is that of effectiveness. What is the most effective way to achieve a desired goal? What is it? If a method is not effective, no matter how much steam it releases, it is an expression of weakness, not strength. So if you go around here hollering about what we need to do, is we need to take back our blah, 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 and we need to build our blah, 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 and we need to have California. We need to have California and Nevada and Mississippi be our country, and we're going to leave you. It doesn't matter what you're saying. If you've been saying this for the last 10 years, 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, and like, nobody has done anything. It hasn't moved any kind of needle. Listen, we've been out here, all this reparations conversation, reparations talk, the resolutions, all the stuff that's happening in Princeton, all of the people that's all us. So us doing that ADOS, Breaking Brown Tone Talks, and the people, y'all who are out there doing all this stuff and advocating, and keeping the pressure on, that's created everything that you see right now. These people who are talking about we need to da-da-da-da-da-da, they haven't done anything. They haven't created anything. So what King is saying is just like, this stuff you're doing is not effective. You're just talking. We're judging yourself by effectiveness. You don't just get to talk and you make yourself feel good because you puff out your chest. Huh? What did you do? And he says, the plain and inexorable fact is that any attempt of the American Negro, to overthrow his oppressor with violence will not work. We do not need President Johnson to tell us this by reminding Negro rioters that they are outnumbered 10-1. The courageous efforts of our own insurrectionist brothers, such as Denmark Vesey and Nat Turner, should be eternal reminders to us that the violent rebellion is doomed from the start. Woo! In violent warfare, one must be prepared to face the fact that there will be casualties by the thousands. Anyone leading a violent rebellion must be willing to make an honest assessment regarding the possible casualties to a minority population confronting a well-armed, wealthy majority with a fanatical right wing that would delight in exterminating thousands of black men, women, and children. How'd that make you feel? And then he says something then on the same page, on page 58, the last paragraph. He says, even if you were going to have, something, it would have to be led by another nation. He says there is no colored nation, including China, and really including. He said no colored nation. Didn't that include every nation in Africa as well? There is no colored nation, including China, that now shows even the potential of leading violent revolution of color in any international population. Ghana, Zambia, Tanganyika, and Nigeria are so busy fighting their own battles against poverty, literacy, and subversive influence of neocolonialism that they offer little hope to Angola, Southern Rhodesia, and it's a different country now, and South Africa, much less to the American Negro. Come on now. It's us. This is our fight. It's always been us. Ain't nobody ever came to save us, and you run out here talking about where you gonna go and who gonna come. Ain't nobody coming for you. Running around, running. What you doing? What's that? Remember that Cat Williams joke? Where you going? Running. Everybody just running in their own imagination. They ain't really running nowhere. Running. Let me just talk about one thing that King didn't have the data, so I didn't like to talk about black buying power, although I understand it. You have to understand that during that era, that's kind of what it comes about, because they had seen, because of segregation, they had seen like black doctors and a lot of black lawyers. They had seen that. And if you don't have any data, you'd be like, well, we got a bunch of stuff here. They had seen something that we've never seen that hasn't been in our lives. So I get it, and we'll talk about it during the calls, but that's one of my criticisms. My last criticism is like the world, we all the same. It sounds like he just kind of put that in there. Like, let me just stick this in here and have an international thing. I didn't like that at all. But if you go to page 54, really quickly. Yeah, and you have to, what you have to understand when he was saying that, America was still America. We didn't have vast globalizations. I don't think globalization, and I don't think King could have. I don't think there's any way for him to know what that was going to look like. So I understand what he was saying in that moment, because I understand what he knew in that moment and what he didn't get a chance to see and know in that moment because he was assassinated. Right, so he didn't get a chance to. You gotta understand, this man was younger than 40. Like, think about that. And I want you to think about something else while you think about that. I want you to think about the fact, if you read this book, think about everybody that King quoted in that book. I have some of the books of the people he quoted, and it was interesting to me that we read so many of the same people. I guess it should not have been, but just think about that. Just think about that in terms of the kind of work that that man had put in intellectually. And I think what we have to do, I know we all have struggles, we all have stuff we have to do, we all have places to go and things to do, people to see, right? But I think you have to see that and understand that we all have to put in a lot of intellectual work. That man put in a lot of intellectual work. That's a lot of reading. The kind of stuff he was quoting, everybody from philosophers to it's not just about, sometimes we tend to be so action oriented, right? But there's a whole intellectual political foundation, and you don't have to have graduated from college or to have graduated from Stanford or to graduated from Harvard or anywhere else to put in that work, right? Your intellectual capacity is not dictated by where you went. What you do every day with your own capacity, that's what will tell anybody, well, okay, what you are and what what you're willing to engage in. So that was very interesting to me. So where was I at? Page 54. Page 54. Go to page 54 towards the bottom. And King says, we are bound together in a single garment of destiny. The language, the cultural patterns, the music, the material prosperity, and even the food of America are an amalgam of black and white. James Baldwin once related how he returned home from school and his mother asked him whether his teacher was colored or white. After a pause, he answered, "She is a little bit colored and a little bit white." This is the dilemma of being a Negro in America. In physical as well as cultural terms, every Negro is a little bit colored and a little bit white. In our search for identity, we must recognize this dilemma. Go to the next paragraph and go half the way down. The problem is that in search for wholeness, pay close attention. In search for wholeness, all too many Negroes seek to embrace only one side of their natures. Some seeking to reject their heritage are ashamed of their color, ashamed of black art and music, and determine what is beautiful and good by the standards of white society. They end up frustrated and without cultural roots. Others seek to reject everything American and identify totally with Africa, even to the point of wearing African clothes. But this approach leads to a frustration because the American Negro is not African. I didn't say it. King said it. You gonna call him xenophobic too? The old Hegelian synthesis still offers the best answer to many of life's dilemmas. The American Negro is neither totally African nor totally Western. He is Afro-American, a truly hybrid, a combination of two cultures. Who are we? We are the descendants of slaves. If King said it, why can't you say it? Why can't we say it? Now go down to the third paragraph. This is the midway through. But we are also Americans, abused and scorned though we may be. Our destiny is tied up with the destiny of America. In spite of the psychological appeals of identifications with Africa, the Negro must face the fact that America is now his home, a home that he helped to build through blood, sweat, and tears. Since we are Americans, the solutions to our problem will not come through seeking to build a separate black nation within a nation, but by finding that creative minority of the concern from the oftentimes of apathetic majority, and together moving toward that colorless, we ain't got that, King, power that we all need for security and justice. I guess he said that. I guess he told you. I guess he told you. I guess he told you. He told you we're not African. How come y'all still running? He said y'all try to find yourself with African clothes. All that stuff. We American. You better own it. Told us that way back when. We still running around like we don't understand who we are, trying to find out. Still running around lost. How long we gonna be lost? God dog, I'm tired. I'm so tired of being lost. Just lost all the time. Go to page 84. Lost. He told you we're not African. What's wrong with y'all? You try to find your identity. Oh, that was good too. I'm not gonna get everything that's good. Ooh. Well, on page 84, he basically talked about what we talked about. How, you know, in terms of immigration, you're gonna call him that too. Like how he says, after the war, the government granted white settlers without cost millions of acres of land in the West, thus providing America's new white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. Yep. We talked about that. Yep. But emancipation, this is what Douglass said, Frederick Douglass. Emancipation granted the Negro freedom to hunger, freedom to winter amid the rains of heaven. Emancipation was freedom and famine at the same time. We didn't get to be free. And if you go to page 95, one of the things that King says in terms of, you know, class, he talks about the specificity of race. In race politics. Is it 95? Oh, 95, and it's the second paragraph, that second long paragraph, page 95. A society that has done something specific against the Negro for hundreds of years must do something specific for him in order to equip him to compete on an equal basis. That is race-specific policy. If you've done something specific against me, then what has to happen is that you do something specifically for me. Not for everybody else. Not everybody, everything. You done something against me. We know you did it. We saw you. We got the camera footage. Now you have to do something for me. You did something against me. We all know what it is. We all clear. Now you have to do something for me. That's race-specific policy. How are we going along with this class-based policy? You can do UBI all day. You can do Garrett. You can do universe-based income. You can do all that stuff. But you gotta fix me. I don't have no problem with the jobs guarantee or King's UBI, but you gotta fix me. And I think King was trying to build alliances. But what he found is that even if white people get that, they're gonna try to find a way to move away from us. Go to page 122 real quick. I swear, every time I do a book club, the time just flies. Well, he talks about, I'm not going to do the quote, but he basically says, we had to, and we know this through reading what we've read about redlining, that we paid more, like to live in slums. We had to pay more. And we all know that because of how it went down, but he goes into that. He goes into the importance of government and goes to page 155. He says something about government. I have voting wrote down here. 155 really quickly. 155. The Negro presently, 155, that's the towards the bottom, that next to last paragraph on page 155. The Negro vote presently is only a partially realized strength. It can still be doubled in the South, in the North, even where Negroes are registered in equal proportion to whites. They do not vote in the same proportions, assailed by a sense of futility. Negroes resist participating in an empty ritual. However, when the Negro citizen learns that united and organized pressure can achieve measurable results, he will make his influence felt. Out of his consciousness, the political power of a roused minority will be enhanced and consolidated. Speaks for itself. Speaks for itself. There is a section too on black leaders I want to get to before we finish up. He had some stuff to say. King has some stuff to say about black leaders. What is that? What I do with that? Black leaders. 158. Let me see something. Let me go to 158. Let me see if I can find it. Okay. 158. And so we shall have to do more than register and more than vote. See, everybody tells us we just got to vote. You guys get out there and vote. And everybody put the I voted sticker on. They like this. King said no. He even said marching. We got to do more than all that. This is just phase one. We got to do a whole lot more. No, you stopped too soon. He says, also we shall have to do more than register and more than vote. We shall have to create leaders who embody virtues that we can respect, who have moral and ethical principles we can applaud with an enthusiasm that enables us to rally support for them based on confidence and trust. Now, here's what he says about alliances. He says, in addition to the development of genuinely independent and representative political leaders, we shall have to master the art of political alliances. He didn't say just align with people of color, align with people that we think have been treated bad. He said we're going to have to align with, we're going to have to figure this alliance thing out. He says Negroes should be natural allies of white reform and independent political groups. We should be. It ain't work out. We tried. Yet they are more commonly organized by old line machine politicians. But what he's trying to say right there is get outside your box. Like don't let just like the Democrats in the mainstream or the big or Nancy Pelosi or the machine, Chicago machine, you figure out who your allies are. Nobody gets to tell you how to ally with anybody. You try to figure it out. Right? You don't just go because the Democratic Party, you go figure your stuff out. So he says we will have to learn to refuse crumbs from big city machines and steadfastly demand a fair share of the loaf. When the machine politicians demur, we must be prepared to act in unity and throw our support to such independent parties or reform wings of the major parties as are prepared to take our demands seriously and fight for them vigorously. That means the Democratic Party is a machine, right? So if you got whoever it is over here, whoever it is, you got somebody within the party. Okay, this caucus wants to do something. Okay, I'm gonna work with you. I don't care if you don't like it. I'm gonna work with them. I'm gonna get my needs met. I'm gonna get their needs met. I gotta be willing to be creative and have a little political imagination in this thing. I can't just be following along. I can't just be picking up Nancy Pelosi's shoes or whatever she doing. I'm not doing that. That's what he's saying in that. And he says a true alliance. A true alliance, this is on page 159, last paragraph. A true alliance is based upon self-interest of each component group and a common interest into which they merge. For an alliance to have permanence and loyal commitment from its various elements, each of them must have a goal from which it benefits, and none must have an outlook in basic conflict with the others. Alliance is based on self-interest, not some kind of moral. It's self-interest. That's what power is. What have we been doing? I don't know what we've been doing. A whole bunch of nothing. Go to page 129. Well, this is the part where he says, do the impossible. I think 156. Yeah, it says this is the Negro's dilemma on page 128. First paragraph. This is the Negro's dilemma. He who starts behind in a race must forever remain behind or run faster. What a dilemma. It is to call to do the impossible. It is enough to call the Negro to give up, to cause the Negro to give up in despair. And yet there are times when life demands the perpetual doing of the impossible. It is enough to cause the Negro, to give him spell, like I said. And yet there are times when the life of our slave forebears, isn't this what I said? The life of our slave forebears is eternal testimony to the ability of men to achieve the impossible, men and women. I know he didn't mean that way, but I'm just saying everybody, all of us. Now compare what he said alliances, you have to have an interest. There has to be a shared thing here. You can't just, and he said in the paragraph before that, you can't just count on somebody showing up just because they showed up last time. There has to be an interest, and we have to be critical of these alliances. Now you have to flick that thing back all the way back to Roland Martin yesterday, when he just went out front for DACA, but he didn't tell us what DACA had, what the people who were pushing DACA had for us. So okay, we're gonna go out front with DACA, but who's coming with us? Okay, we're going to ride with you on this one, but which one you going to ride with us on? Okay, you came and picked us up this week. When we coming to pick you up? Okay, when is that happening? And if you can't tell me when that's happening, then what you have to say is that the people at the forefront of leadership in the ADOS community right now are people who don't know how to make deals. They only know how to grift. They don't know how to do stuff in favor of the ADOS community. They only know how to talk. They don't know how to do and say, hey, these are the terms of our agreement. They just know how to show up and say, yes, sir. Yes, sir, boss. No, ain't nobody doing that no more. And I mean, King laid a perfect framework for this. I mean, it's not perfect. It's a framework for what we talk about. It's not a perfect framework. There's some things, like I mentioned earlier, I disagree with. But for the most part, I understand why I disagree. And he said something very interesting about Negro leaders. And after this, I'm gonna give it to the floor. But I want to just say what he said about Negro leaders. He said the majority of Negro political leaders do not ascend to prominence. This is on page 156. I'm sorry, page 156. But let me go to the second paragraph first. Then I'll come to that, because he talks about power and what that looks like. He says the new task of the liberation movement, therefore, is not merely to increase the Negro registration and vote. Equally imperative is the development of a strong voice that is heard in the smoke-filled rooms where party debating and bargaining proceed. A black face that is mute in party councils is not political representation. The ability to be independent, please hang on to the word independent. The ability to be independent, assertive, respected when the final decisions are made is indispensable for an authentic expression of power. Independent. How many independent Negroes in power you know? So go to towards the bottom of the paragraph that starts with the majority. The majority of Negro political leaders do not ascend to prominence on the shoulders of mass support. Do tell MLK. Although genuinely popular leaders are now emerging, most are selected by white leadership. Elevated to positions, supplied with resources, and inevitably subjected to white control. The mass of Negroes nurtures a healthy suspicion towards these manufactured leaders. Experience tells them that the color is the chief argument their leaders are offering to induce loyalty and solidarity. The Negro politician, they know, spends little time in persuading them that he embodies personal integrity, commitment, and ability. He offers few programs and less service. Tragically, he is in too many respects not a fighter for a new life, but a figurehead for an old one. He's a status quo Negro. How many status quo Negroes we got? Hence, very few Negro political leaders are impressive or illustrious to their constituents. They enjoy only limited loyalty and qualified support. This relationship in turn hampers the Negro leader in bargaining with genuine strength and independent firmness with the white political leaders, party leaders. The whites are all too well aware of his impotence and his remoteness from his constituents, and they deal with him as a powerless subordinate. If that ain't 90% of the Congressional Black Caucus, I don't know what is. You have even the people who show up to vote for you, people don't show up to vote in mass. You have no wind beneath your wings. And that's a problem for you. That is a problem for you. But King has a solution. Just go to 158 really quick before we go to the phones. 158 really quick. And so we shall have to do more than register and more than vote. More. Voting is a part. It's not everything. If you just show up and vote, you're just giving your stuff to the party, and you're not really putting anything with that vote. We have to start asking ourselves what else goes along with the vote. Whether it's political education, creating leaders, all of that. Voting is one aspect. So we shall have to do more than register and more than vote. We shall have to create leaders who embody virtues we can respect, who have moral and ethical principles we can applaud with an enthusiasm that enables us to rally support for them based on confidence and trust. Yep, sounds about right. So, fam, it's I can't get to all of them, but it's a lot of words in this book, and I want y'all to bring some to me. We gonna talk on the phone. We y'all. That was so much in here, and there's so much. Everybody will talk about King. Everybody love to talk about King. Did y'all read this book? This book is a condemnation of just about everybody who talks about him or who invokes his name. So I want you all to have your say. Give me a second. I'm gonna set up the phones, and then as usual, we'll be back. Okay, fam, we are back. We are back, fam. We are back. So, I'm going to go to the phones. Keep in mind, fam, a lot of people read the book. The phones are lit. So keep your comment concise. I'm not telling you to rush yourself off the phone, but let's just be concise and be respectful of other people who want to also have a conversation about the book. So I'm going to my first call. I am going to 216. 216, what's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind?
Hey, Yvette, this is Lee.
Hey.
I'm Kunta for Life in the chat and calling from Cleveland.
What's going on?
I just want to say this was an awesome read. It's one of the best books I've read so far with ADOS movement. And I've never, ever had such an intimate look into King. I've always seen the Eyes on the Prize movies, or, you know, we'll see snippets of his speech, things like that. But actually to get into his mind was awesome.
Yeah, so he was honest. He was real honest too. Like, I don't even know if you have people write like that and write that honest anymore.
Yes. So I just have 3 takeaways from the book, or just comments. The first one is on page 127, where he talks about what it means to be a Negro.
Okay.
And I'll just read a little bit of that.
Go ahead.
127. It says, it's like the 3rd paragraph down. Okay. He says, and so being a Negro in America is not a comfortable experience. It means being a part of the company of the bruised, the battered, the scarred, and the defeated. Being a Negro in America means trying to smile when you want to cry. It means trying to hold on to physical life amid psychological death. It means the pain of watching your children grow up with clouds of inferiority in their mental skies. It means having your legs cut off and then being condemned for being a cripple. And then my next takeaway is when he talks about tension on page 96. Let me get to it real quick. He was saying that tension isn't bad. You need some tension. And don't be afraid of tension. And then, like, almost at the bottom, he makes this quote. He says, we did not cause the cancer, we exposed it. You know. And the next thing I want to talk about is on page 87, where he talks about civil rights passed versus civil rights implemented. And we see that a lot. We see that a lot in all our laws and all our bills. Yeah, I said something about that even too, with this H.R. 40 bill. You know. And then the last thing I want to talk about is on page 46. And this is when I say I saw an intimate part with King on page 46 when he talks about how he was booed. I've never heard that before, but King was talking about how he's been in front of a whole bunch of different audiences, white audiences, hostile audiences, but he was only booed by his own people. And he talked about hope, and he was saying how he helped these guys grow up in the movement. Stokely, you know, the SNCC movement, they were all young. They were all wanting something better for our people. But then when hope is deferred, you get angry. And a lot of times you turn on your own leaders. And he was saying that he cried a lot at night, but he knew one thing that he had to do was have patience for the young people in the movement. So I just want to say I love y'all, fam.
Oh, thank you, fam.
Keep hope alive. Keep hope in your heart. This is not a race that's to be taken swiftly. This is our life. You know.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much, Yvette.
No, thank you. No, thank you for your very informed call. I appreciate that. Thank you, because you got some stuff I didn't get to. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you, fam. Yeah.
Peace.
Yeah. I do think King was very open in terms of, like, you know, when he was hurt and when people said and like his thinking versus their thinking. And even when he criticized like Black Power, he didn't condemn it or condemn them. He said, I understand why you feel the way you feel. I'm just telling you that's not gonna work. And so it was very interesting in that way. I'm going now to 267. 267, I'm coming to you. What's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind?
It's the Mile High Fry.
The Mile High Fry.
Yeah, the Mile High Fry. I haven't talked to you in a minute, sister. How you been?
I've been good. How about you?
I'm trying, honey. I can't complain. Listen, I didn't want to take up too much of your time, but I had some topics that I'd like to talk about.
Okay.
I'll throw them out there, and then whatever you like, I'd like to just expound on it just a bit, and then I'll leave it alone. One is, I have a real close relationship with Dr. King through my grandfather, who helped build Liberty Baptist Church in Chicago, ironically, that sits on King Drive. And I understood his frustration that he talked about with the church, because a lot of it I think had to deal with it when he was living in Chicago during that time, because he had residence at the time.
He had a flat, he had an apartment
there. He wrote this book. Exactly. But his school buddy was the lead pastor at the church that my grandfather helped build in that pulpit called Liberty Baptist Church. And the way that those preachers played themselves with the politicians that, the random machine politics at that time, Daley in particular, a lot of those preachers were in Daley's hip pocket. And that's what caused my mom kind of to rebel and leave the church, because once that lead pastor sided with someone like Daley, when King was actually working against him because he understood his racism, that left a real sour taste in my mother's mouth. And incidentally, consequently, she ended up becoming a full-fledged member of the Communist Party. And both of my parents are atheists. I think I'm probably one of the only brothers on earth you probably ever talked to whose parents were atheists. And a lot of it stemmed from how his classmate treated him when he moved to Chicago, when he was trying to battle that Democratic machine in Chicago. So I'm a product of that.
Okay. I understand that, fam. But, I appreciate you for calling in. Got to keep it moving today, fam. You might get hey, I got to keep it moving. I'm going to 503. 503. What's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind?
Hey, Yvette. This is Quentin calling from Portland, Oregon.
What's going on, Quentin? Tonight? Speak up a little bit for me.
Okay.
Oh, I got you. I think I got you.
Oh yeah. Can you hear me better now?
I got you better now.
All right. One of the quotes I wanted to point out was from page 163, where King said, "Very few Jews sank into despair and escapism, even when discrimination assailed the spirit and corroded initiative."
Okay.
And I think ADOS could learn from this. Too many of us respond to anti-ADOS discrimination and setbacks, by throwing our hands up in the air and stomping out of the political arena and abdicating our responsibilities. Instead of doing that, it should make us persist and fight harder, I believe. So that was something that I found very interesting. And then the quote you read on page 156, where you said a black face that is mute in party councils is not political representation. The ability to be independent, assertive, and respected when the final decisions are made is indispensable for an authentic expression of power. This reminded me of an article you shared recently about how most ADOS politicians don't represent and push ADOS interests. I think the only way I think we'll be able to have ADOS race-first politicians is if ADOS makes politics the center of our culture. It has to become everything to us. It has to be something the masses of us engage in with fervor. So we could learn a lot from the Jews who progressed because they possessed a tradition of education combined with social and political action.
Well, fam, in the book, King talks about that. I don't know what page it's on, but in the book he talks about we have to change our culture. He says we have to create a culture where this is normal. He says we have to create a culture where this kind of politics is a normal way of doing things, as opposed to the kind of politics that we've been doing. So he spoke to that.
Yes, and we essentially have to become all that our ADOS politicians need. Otherwise, the white power structure, they'll continue to be able to select them and control them and essentially keep them neutered and powerless once they do get in those positions and seats. But it only works if we show up and we apply the pressure and we're engaged, and it's a part of our culture. So it's kind of like a catch-22. And then I wanted to touch on something that I think was pretty good that you brought up earlier, and it was kind of ADOS must answer the question, what do we do about white backlash? But I think, after it's coming, we know that it's coming. It's always been there. But before we can even get to that question, we need to figure out what we're going to do about the complicit white liberals who, as you stated at the beginning of the show, want us to only go so far. They're not really pushing for the transformative politics that we need. So I think that that's our job, to figure out how are we going to answer that question and really it's a tough one, but it has to be answered. So that's another challenge of ADOS. And then the narrative around reparations, kind of policing that, like the Black Power slogan versus Freedom Now. I think there are different slogans and stuff floating around out here, and we don't want to take a wrong turn and go in a direction that isn't conducive to us getting our needs met and our goals met. So I think that's also a challenge for ADOS, and dispelling the myths like black buying power and all the different things. And our numbers, we have to get bigger numbers because we've been having skirmishes thus far. We haven't really had the broad war that is required, and not to minimize what we've been able to do thus far, but imagine what we could do with larger numbers and with people.
All right.
So I think those are the challenges that are facing ADOS.
All right, I appreciate you calling in, fam. Listen, in terms of the education, King says on page 164, education, he talks about the importance of political education. He says, education without social action is a one-sided value because it has no true power potential. Social action without education is a weak expression of pure energy. We have seen so much of that. We have seen so much social action without education is a weak expression of pure energy. Deeds deeds uninformed by educated thought can take false directions. When we go into action and confront our adversaries, we must be as armed with knowledge as they. Our policies should have the strength of deep analysis beneath them to be able to challenge the clever sophistries of our opponents. He's just telling you what it is. I'm going now to 347. What's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind? Let's keep it short, people. The lines are very full.
Hey, good evening, Yvette. My name is Jimmy. I'm from New York.
What's going on, Jimmy?
I'm good. So I wanted to kind of carry with the white liberal discussion that you spoke on earlier.
You read the book? You read the book?
Page 90.
Page what?
Yes, I did, yeah.
Okay, page what?
95.
Okay.
Yeah, so page 95, first paragraph. I'm just going to read a snippet. King says that love that does not satisfy justice is no love at all. It is merely a sentimental affection, little more than what one would have for a pet. Love at its best is justice
concretized.
Is unconditional.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. yeah, big words. I know. And
yeah, that's a weird word. That's a weird word. I understand.
Right. And then he further goes on and says that the white liberal must rid himself. This is at the last chapter of the notion that there can be a senseless transition, and you spoke about that. And he goes on to later say on page 96 that the Negro has not gained a signal right in America without persistent pressure and agitation.
Yeah.
And
Hello? I don't know what happened to our friend. He was talking. Hello, you there? Hello?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, go ahead.
Hello?
He was getting good too. He fell off. He fell off the phone. I'm going right now to 601. 601, what's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind?
Hi, Yvette.
Hey, what's going on?
This is Sharon. I'm calling from Jackson, Mississippi. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. Yvette, you know I love you.
I love you back.
There were two things in the book that to me signified ADOS, and one is an introduction on X at the very bottom.
On what page? What page you said?
In the introduction, you know, they call it 10, but I'm saying
Okay.
the capital letter X.
Oh, you
know,
child, you said X. You said X. Okay.
At the riots in Watts, and a young man declared, "We won because we made them pay attention to us." That statement right there reminds me of ADOS. They are paying attention to ADOS, and we have won. The second thing that made me think about ADOS is in the introduction again on XB at the very bottom.
Okay.
Where it says, King used pages of this book to press himself and his co-workers to move beyond a narrow, legalistic understanding of their work, to open themselves to newer, deeper, less traveled directions. That right there makes me think again of ADOS. You know what? Even in the Bible, they say the road less traveled is narrow. You know, and this is, I mean, that's really and truly my interpretation of it, and in how it makes me think about us. And on page 23, where they talk about Black Power and James Meredith and Carmichael. You know, when in this part it talks about when James Meredith went on, you know, had his own freedom march through Mississippi, and he got shot in the back, and they thought he was dead, and they went to the hospital to see him. And King and his friend knew that James Meredith was a loner. You know, he does stuff by himself, and they asked him if they could carry on, and he agreed to let them carry on with the march. And even with Stokely Carmichael, you know, when they went to Greenwood that night, and he, you know, started the Black Power slogan during the movement. What I found interesting is, you know, King wrote this, you know, and then to think about James Meredith and Stokely Carmichael after his death. And I don't want to disrespect anybody alive or dead, but, you know, when King was assassinated in 1968, these two men went totally different directions. And being from Mississippi, you know, I had a chance to hear my dad talk about James Meredith and Stokely Carmichael, and he would say things like, "Yeah, James Meredith left Mississippi. He didn't do nothing for Mississippi. You know, after he graduated, he had that march, and then King was killed, and he went to New York and became a Republican and ran against Adam Clayton Powell." So it's interesting to think about what happened with these two people after King's death. And even with Stokely Carmichael, after King's death, my dad would say, "Yeah, Stokely Carmichael was scared, he hauled ass and left." Well, after King's death, Stokely Carmichael did leave the United States, and he moved to Africa.
Well, let me say this fair. I don't mean to disrespect anybody either, but let me just say this. Because I wasn't alive, I only know what I've read, and you know what you've heard. Let me just say this too. I have had elders tell me the same thing. Like I just sit there and listen. I don't know, and I'm not here, and I'm not gonna tell you no either. Yes, he did. I have had elders tell me the stories of people who, like, after everything got hot and bullets started flying, that people decided to go their own way. And that's kind of part of the problem. So, you know, that's kind of part of the problem. Everybody who was into the fight until people started catching bullets. And it's not just catching bullets. Cars started exploding out of nowhere. How do cars explode out of nowhere? Like, King wasn't the only, we know of King. We know what happened to Malcolm. But it's a lot of people under them that, like, had some wild stuff happen and they ended up murdered. So a lot of people did cut and run. I'm not speaking specifically of these two, but I just wanted to give some context to what you were saying. Go on, fam. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's it. I just wanted to just bring those things up because, you know, he was alive. He was talking about them and all the different things. But even with James Meredith, and I see him occasionally, you know, in the city of Jackson, the National Guard had to go and protect him to go to school at Ole Miss to get his law degree. he had people rooting for him in the movement and everything. But then he decided you want to be a loner and have your own march. I mean, people were there, and that was something that Martin Luther King told him. Said, this march is for everybody. It's just not for you to just go out there and do it on your own. This march encompasses the whole civil rights movement. And, that's all I remember seeing, because I was just 3. I just remember seeing, the video of when the National Guard was helping him get in law school. Then after he gets his degree, he wants to go by himself. No, you can't do nothing by yourself. We were there for you to go and get your law degree and be admitted in Ole Miss.
And King talks about that in this book. King talks about the collective. He says in this book, like we will oppress as a collective and we will rise as a collective. And the thing that's so important with that about me in terms of that is that, yeah, we have a lot of people right now who say, no, I'm an individual. I want to go and be an individual. I'm going to fly free. I'm going to fly free. Fly, 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 fly. And it's just like, no, that's not how you do it. Like until race is over, you don't get to just go run off and try to be an individual. I'll be the first to tell you it ain't going to work no way. So don't call me when you fall off and bump your head. But we don't get to do that. You don't have the ability as an oppressed group to just say you're going to run off and be an individual. And race is going to hit you and you're going to come back and say, help me out or whatever. You don't get to run off and do individual stuff. Especially like when you said when you get something, it's because somebody or a group, we lifted you up. You don't get to run off now. It's not how it works. But I'll let you finish, fam. I'm sorry.
Okay. And one last thing.
Sure.
I want you to know that after doing my genealogy, I found my 5th great-grandfather, Christian Clark, born 1784 and found him on the 1870 census. He lived in Grand Gulf, Mississippi via Kentucky.
Okay.
And on my great-grandfather's side, I found the Welch. The Welch married somebody on the Mayflower, so I'm a descendant of the Mayflower. And I had put it on my Facebook page, and somebody said, well, why you put that? I said, because I want reparations.
They don't get to tell you anything. Don't police my Facebook page anyway. You don't get to tell me, ask me what's on my Facebook page. Go somewhere. Bother yourself. Stop worrying me. Some people are like, you ever had a bad tooth or a problem with your tooth and your tongue? For some reason your tongue just can't leave it alone. Some people are like that. You just like the tongue that worries the tooth. Stop. Just what are you asking that for? Why don't you just leave me be? Gosh. But thank you, fam. I appreciate it. It was a very good call. I appreciate that. Oh, just worried.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, fam. Why you put that up? Well, whatever. Shut up. I'm going right now to 704. 704. What's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind?
Hello, can I be heard?
What's going on?
Can you hear?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Peace and greetings all, ADOS family. I want to thank you, Yvette, because when I first started listening to you, I finally got a real political education.
Oh, thank you. Flattery get you nowhere. Come on, this way.
And thanks to you, I finally delved into MLK, Dr. Martin Luther King, and realized what a great man he was for his age. Unfortunately, he didn't get a chance to see the fruition, but I think he left us a good framework, the past, so we can see where we are in the future now. See where our strategies may have failed and where we can move on in the future. That's all I wanted to say.
Appreciate it, fam. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, fam.
For the ADOS fam.
Oh, I appreciate it, fam. And thank you for calling in. I agree with you. I think he did leave a good framework. I think we have underestimated how good a framework he was. We have kind of whitewashed King into, just we love everybody, and King was about love. And King, it was a lot of stuff in here. There was a lot of stuff in here. We can quote it chapter by chapter. There's a lot of stuff in here that wasn't just about this kind of meaninglessness of love. Love was with justice, and love was with power, and how to get power, and how to move, all of that. What you talking about? So I'm going now to 510. 510, what's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Yvette? This is Daryl. How are you tonight?
Pretty good, Daryl. How are you?
I'm good. So I want to direct your attention to page 162 at the bottom is piggybacking off something you said in the previous caller. In the future, we must become intensive political activists. We must be guided in this direction because we need political strength more desperately than any other group in American society. Most of us are far too poor to have adequate economic power, and many of us are too rejected by the culture to be part of any tradition of power. Necessity will draw us towards the power inherent in the creative uses of politics. And to me, that paragraph encapsulates everything you've been saying for the last 4 years.
I underlined it too. I said I underlined that too. I underlined that whole paragraph. Political power. Yep. We ain't got no money. What you gonna do?
Instead of complimenting you like everybody else, I want to say this to you. I believe you and Tone are the 21st century version of the Underground Railroad.
Aww.
And instead of freeing people physically, not to diminish that because that was important,
absolutely.
You guys are freeing people socially, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, ecumenically, and most importantly, politically. Big fans of both of you.
Thank you, fans.
I've streamed your conference. Sorry I couldn't come, but I will see you next year.
Absolutely.
Keep doing what you're doing.
Appreciate it.
And big shout out to the ADOS family. Y'all, let's keep it moving. Have a good night.
Appreciate it, fam. Yeah, that was an important. I had that underlined too. That's an important quote. He said, "We don't have the money. We don't have it. So what we gonna do? Like, what we have to be political. Like, it's necessity. Thank you for calling in, fam. I appreciate it. But like, it's necessity that we be political. We're not political. It's not. We don't have a choice. We don't get to decide. Well, I don't really like politics. I'm not really into it. You don't get to choose. Who told you got to choose? Who said that to you? No, that's not how it works. It is what it is. We are what we are, and we have at our disposal what we have. So barbecue and mildew. I'm going now to 201. 201. What's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind about the book?
Hello.
Hey, what's going on? 201.
Hey, 201-233.
Yep. Yep.
Hey, how you doing?
Pretty good.
All right. It's a blessing and honor to be my first call out of Sin City.
Okay.
Page 120.
Okay.
We're talking about the cave and the understanding of being in the cave. Can I read something if you don't mind?
No, go ahead.
Okay. As long as people are ignored, as long as they are voiceless, as long as they are trampled by the feet of iron exploitation, their danger that day, like little children, will have their emotional outbursts, which will break out in violence in the streets. That's a tough passage. That's a deep passage. And I just want to thank you for bringing me and my family to light as to ADOS.
Thank you, fam. Thank you. That was a deep passage, too. That was a deep... I have everything underlined that everybody called in. We underlined the same things. Thank you, fam. Yeah, that was deep.
All right. It's a blessing.
Thank you, fam. And what that line is really telling us, too, what that paragraph on page 120 is telling us, too, is that, that's what happens when you don't let us be citizens. Like, just be like kids in the street. Like, yeah, I'm gonna throw some stuff. I'm gonna do some stuff. Like, but it's you're doing this, not me. This is you. That was powerful. I'm not gonna lie about it. I'm not gonna lie about it. I am going now to 757. 757. What's your name? I mean, where you calling from, and what's your thought about the book?
Hi, Yvette. Mr. How are you? This is Sloan speaking. I'm on my Virginia number, but I'm in New York right now.
Okay.
Page 40.
Okay.
I made some 5 bullet points. One, when he was talking about the psychological state of making a black man, down. You accustom him to rigid discipline. Another point, demand from him unconditional submission. Third point, impress upon him the sense of of an innate inferiority. Fourth point, develop in him a paralyzing fear of white men. And the fifth point that I noted in page 40 is train him to adapt a master's code for good behavior and instill in him a sense of complete dependence. I want to jump from there. That speaks for itself, I guess. I want to jump from there to page 122. I thought you'd stay on this. This is more metaphorical to me, even though it's straightforward. There are 2 sentences here where it says, there's just not enough space in the neighborhood to run off the energy of childhood without running into busy, traffic-laden streets. And I understood anew the conditions to which made of this ghetto, the emotional pressure cooker that folks are in. And lastly, on page, this is important to me too, on page 186, and I want to delve into that and do this real quick, but also talk about UBI for just a second.
Okay.
Once the aspiration, well, let me just jump here. He's talking about people that they make you marvel at the Western technology and the imagination of people awakening to religious, and one cannot hope to keep people locked out of the earthly kingdom of wealth, health, and happiness. I thought it was very interesting that he would say wealth, health, and happiness. And, those are the points I want to make. I just want to say one thing about UBI.
Okay.
UBI is kind of interesting because I think if I was to do it, if I was to talk to, say, Andrew Yang, whoever's saying UBI, I'd say, okay, you can give everybody UBI, but first, at least for ADOS, we want a debt jubilee before you give us a UBI. You give us a debt jubilee, then we'll take the UBI. And I think that's the only way UBI can work, if everybody gets, or at least ADOS gets a debt jubilee. So those are the points I want to make that I got from the book. And thank you for helping me to read this. I read a lot of books, but I never read a king like this. One more thing for the sister that spoke about Stokely. You have to understand the COINTELPRO came down on Stokely, and what they did, they threatened his mama. That's why he left the United States. But he still stayed in the struggle to the day he died. He's back in the States too. So
let me ask you a question. You said they threatened his mama. Did he take his mama with him? I'm just asking.
Take his mama with him. They want him to leave. They threaten his mama. Whatever, and that's why he left. And then, but he never joined any party or anything like that. The only movie he was ever in was Snick. He never joined any movement, anything like that. He was Pan-African to the day he died.
Okay, but he went to Africa though, isn't that? But he went to Africa. And I'm not. The boy went to Africa. It's just a lot of people. I'm just trying to work it through. Like that's kind of Pan-Africanist, isn't it though? And I understand why you would have been a Pan-Africanist during that period. Like I get it, even though King was on another side of it. But I understand it. I'm just saying, isn't that kind of a head nod to it, in a certain sense? Or would you disagree? And it's fine if you do.
No, I understand. He went to Africa, yes, but he came. He was in the States. He died in the States.
Yeah. I remember when he died. He actually called when he died. He actually called. Right before he died, he wanted some members of the student government at Howard University to come and talk to him. And I wasn't allowed to go, even though I was in the student government. And I think I would. Boy, that's a whole nother story. But yeah, I remember when he passed.
A lot of us run back. Remember, I lived 6 months out of the year in Africa, and I lived 6 months here. Right now, let me put it this way: my political head is ADOS. Let me put it that way. But remember, I've been through a lot of these movements. I'm a little older. In fact, I just talked to this guy named Melvin Tippett, who's been archiving a lot of stuff we've been through. And it's interesting to me that a lot of people get hurt. They don't understand what's going on. I think a lot of my Pan-African friends, they don't understand. When I talk to them and break it down to them, then they understand. But it takes patience to talk to folks. You have to put it right, because people are just sold on that, and they just don't understand, because they don't understand. They're doing an ideology. This is a political movement backed up by data, as you would say. And I just don't think that people understand. But it can be broken down. It's easy to understand, and you can live a bunch of places. I don't want to go into what I'm doing.
Well, no, I'm not criticizing him in that choice, because I kind of shy away from criticizing people who were under like the physical threat of violence at the moment. So I'm just trying to understand him. Like, I'm not even trying to, like, I've read a lot of him. I'm not even trying to like criticize him in that. I'm trying to like understand where everybody's coming from. So I totally understand what you're saying, and I totally understand what the caller was saying. I honestly think this would be a great conversation to have, like, with a group. Like, this would be a great conversation to have. It would be, yeah.
That's exactly right. I just had a conversation. I talk to people all the time, but I just wanted to map out that when I was bringing those passages, it hit me. Like, first you had the psychological thing, you had the physical thing, and then you had basically this whole thing about your wealth and your religion, whatever it have you. And I thought that all the stuff comes together. This thing is almost like a perfect storm that we're in, but we also in a perfect storm to get out of this thing that we're in. Anyway, that's just my little. Thanks so much for your work.
No problem. I appreciate it, fam. Thank you for calling in. That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Mama knew what it was. Anyway, I'm going to 201. What's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind about the book? You there, 201? 201. Okay. All right. I'm going now to 678. 678. What's going on? Hello?
Hi, Yvette. This
Hey.
is Sean. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. What's going on?
Hi, this is Sean in Atlanta. It is an honor to speak with you.
Oh, thank you.
And I really do appreciate your work and Tone's work. I just feel like the young lady said earlier, we're in the midst of a spiritual movement.
Mm-hmm.
And so this book has literally reverberated through me, just reading. And I got to be honest, I did the audio book, so I don't have
It's still the book.
But I have a lot. Okay. I have a lot of points that I wanted to go through because, as you're going through life, you kind of notice that everyone is kind of oblivious to other people's plight, and it would be like this is huge to me. This is huge. My great grandparents are the reason why everybody is getting to enjoy all of it. So I just wanted to first let me just go over some of the points out of the book. The first one is that really stood out to me is freedom is not given, it is won. And I don't know why that just continues to keep coming back to me because I'm thinking we have to win this. We have to win this in order to become free. And so that's one of the points that continues to just come back to me over and over again. And I'm not sure what the meaning of that is, but it just stays on my mind. We have to win this. And the other point that I wanted to discuss is like what I was just saying about just everyone being so oblivious, and it's like almost intentional. It's like in the book what they were saying that they will act like children. You hear what we're saying. You hear us loud and clear, but you're acting like you don't see us. You're acting like you don't hear us.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, bitterness doesn't have the capacity to make the distinction between some and all. And so what happens is that we all become bitter because of the, we can't make the distinction. And so that was another thing that really kind of stood out to me. And I'm just going to make my last point.
Okay.
My last point is, an oppressed people won't stay oppressed forever.
Yeah.
And I want to leave it at that because that just says, you know what, we will overcome. Thank you, Yvette, for your work. I so appreciate you.
I appreciate you calling in. Thank you.
And I wanted to say, love you.
Love
all
back.
of the ADOS family.
Appreciate it, fam. Thanks for the comments. Yeah, thanks for the comments. Y'all can read the audio book. The book is the book. What you know, how you get the information is how you get it. 301, I'm coming to you. What's your name? Where you calling from? What's the point about the book you want to make?
Good evening, Sister Yvette. How you doing? This is Marshall from the DMV.
What's going on, Marshall?
Evening, sister. First of all, I know we got a lot of calls up, so if I talk a little fast, I'm going through a lot of points, so please just slow me down. But first of all, I got to say once again, thank you for signing my book at the conference. As I said, it was one of the best gifts I got in a long while, and I thank you for that. No problem. Quickly, I want to give a shout out to not trying to take up time, but the person that I got the book from, Sister Tansy Flake, she runs the ADOS DMV site on Facebook, and she had a great exercise in advocacy where to get us to force the NAACP and the Urban League and our local members of the CBC and the National CBC to sign the amicus brief. She gave us an exercise to email these members, email these chapters, and also to contact our local and national offices of Comcast. And in doing so, in showing that I actually won the book. So that's how I was able to get that. So shout out to her, and shout out to Sister Chanel on the ADOS Book Club on Facebook. She's running that and been keeping us up to date on the chapters and great information coming from that.
That's nice. So, that's good.
Yes, and so getting into this book, let me tell you that when people over the past decades have talked about Dr. King, and I have a dream, and I want my 4 little children to grow up where they won't be judged by the color of the skin, but the content of character. Over the years, that has come to emasculate King and makes him flattened and weak. And thank you so much for suggesting this book, because this really takes King away from being just a dreamer and makes him more of a realist, in his time. And that's one of the main things that I got from this book. That Dr. King was not a sucker. He was not a punk. And if you go through this book, I'll say anybody who just brings up those 2 quotes ever to you again, tell them, read Chaos of Community, and then come back to me and tell me, that he was just a dreamer, that all he wanted to do was be not judged by the color of his skin. You got to read this. My second point going into this book is that throughout this book, I feel as though Dr. King is trying to right the ship. When he's talking about black power, when he's talking about white backlash, it seems as though he knows that the ground is shifting from under him. He's seen the riots in Watts. He's feeling the effects of black power and how it's taking away from what the advocacy that he's doing with SCLC. Like on page 3, when you read that quote in Ramparts, where the author of that report was very critical of him and the nonviolent movement. Between that, and think about it, this is 1967. The article comes out in Rampart. Remember, this book is released in June of '67. 2 months prior, Dr. King gives that famous, almost infamous speech at Riverside Church in New York, the Beyond Vietnam speech. So at that time when this book comes out, it's like, okay, things are happening around me, and I got to kind of get it back in place. And to frame it, it's like when he has the campaign in Chicago, people, the first sister that called in, shout out to her, she spoke about King being booed, and his response to violence, where on page 60, he speaks about how in response to violence being an option, fewer people have been killed in the past 10 years of nonviolent protests across the South than there were killed one night in Watts. So he's looking at, both sides of that,
Yeah.
And with the white liberals, you were on the page, and people got to it close, he's catching it from them. He's in Chicago, he's doing these protests in Roosevelt Park and other parts of the south side of Chicago that, my Chicago ADOS fam know about. He was talking about how the white backlash was coming, that you're creating, this is page 96, you're creating hostilities and hatred in the white communities, and I'm just going through my notes, in which you are
are marching, you are only developing white backlash. And he later goes into the whole chapter about white backlash. Like, it was always there.
Yeah.
It just came to the surface there. It didn't go anywhere. It's always been there. So with Dr. King, he's trying to right the ship. And I don't know if you would agree with this, but in reading this book, as eloquent as it is, as many quotable, as you said, I was feeling for you at the beginning of the telecast, because you're talking about, like, I could go into all these quotables. How there's just this, did you feel this sense of dread as you read the book?
Yeah, I did.
Into it.
I really felt like, I mean, it was a sense of dread, and it was a sense of, like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, come on, man. Like, what do y'all want? How did you think this was going to work? Like, it was kind of like disappointment too in his own people. Like, I felt like he was a little bit disappointed. Like
he was, but I get into the sense of dread because, like, I know it's like we know what's coming. Being students of history, we know what's coming. Two quotes from two of his fraternity brothers and very close confidants. His lieutenant, Andrew Young. And as I said before, think of the premise of 1967. Things are moving, black power is rising, and he's trying to right the ship. Andrew Young says that Dr. King, I saw it in a video a few years ago, where he was afraid to go to a shrink because he knew that if he went to go see a therapist, those notes would probably end up in the hands of the FBI. He knew he was being hunted. Yeah. He knew that he knew that his life was on the line. Dick Gregory was on the Rock Newman Show, which is broadcast from your alma mater, WHUT-TV. And you can check this out on YouTube. In the beginning of that telecast, Rock Newman was talking to Dick Gregory about, his relation with Dr. King. And he very vividly said Dr. King went through some things that even Jesus didn't go through. And I couldn't get that out of my head as I'm reading through this book and how this man, Dr. King was one of the greatest Americans they have ever produced. For a man to love his people and to love his country as much as he did, to go through what he went through, and I'm going to preface that with page 137. And he's doing an analysis of Booker T. Washington, and I'm gonna it's the first paragraph, and I'm gonna span through it. I'm gonna skip through it. Equally fallacious is the notion that ethical appeals and persuasion alone will bring justice. If the Negro does not add persistent pressure to his patient plea, he will end up empty-handed. In a not too distant yesterday, Booker T. Washington tried this path of patient persuasion. I do not share the notion that he was an Uncle Tom who compromised for the sake of keeping the pace. Washington sincerely believed that if the South was not pushed too hard, that if the South was not forced to do something that it did not for the moment want to do, it would voluntarily rally in the end to the Negro's cause. Washington's error was that he underestimated the structures of evil. Let me say that again. Washington's error was that he underestimated the structures of evil as the consequences of his philosophy. Oppressionist persuasion not only served as a springboard for racist Southerners to dive into deeper and more ruthless oppression of the Negro. Now, Dr. King's movement was not pressureless, but as I read that, and especially the sentence that I read twice over, I'm like, Doc, I kept saying this. I was reading the book, and I was saying it to the book. Scratch out Booker T. Washington, add yourself, and this is exactly what they're going to do to you. And the sense of dread I had is not even so much that we know within a year of this book being released, he's going to be assassinated. But we know that Black America is going to be on fire after that. And then afterwards, there's going to be this benign neglect policy, especially in northern cities. And really, I mean, I can take my own hometown of Washington, D.C. here. We saw U Street burn, H Street burned, and those communities did not recover really until the very late 90s, maybe even 2000, and that was with the onset of early gentrification. And so, like I said, as eloquent as this book is, as wonderful as it was, I'm like, Doc, you don't know what's coming. They're going to do the same thing to you, Doc, and as much as I love this book, I couldn't get away from it.
But you know what, fam? You kind of want... I felt that way in the book, too. Like, it's almost like there's certain points in the book where, like, we all know MLK is gone, but you want to talk to him. Like you want to be like, no, like listen.
Yeah, and then, I felt straight. I was in Starbucks one night looking for another book, and I was reading and going over my notes, and I had this woman looking at me kind of sideways, and I showed her the book, and she kind of nodded at me, and she's like, and I kind of had a conversation with her about it. So I'm going to get off the line. Sis, once again, love you. Thank you for signing my book.
No problem, fam.
Also, real quick, you always want to give suggestions of the next book club. I will say this here. If you suggest the Clarence Thomas book, I will grin and bear it, and for the love of you and the book club and the 81 fam, I will read it. But if you've ever read My Grandfather's Son, when this sucker said that his Yale law degree was worth 15 cents because it had the air of inferiority because of affirmative action on it, I'm like, I'm totally through with you.
But you know what? There's so much damage. That's not going to be. I'm not going to announce that.
Once again, I'm really hoping that we do a book club on Edward Baptiste. The half has never been told.
That's so long though. But don't you think that's a heavy read right now for people? Don't you think that's a heavy read right now for people? You want to just go through it? Go do it.
I say the thing, we can start it at the beginning of the year.
Okay.
At the beginning, it's a heavy read, yes. But there's a recent book that just came out by Todd G. Hamilton. Todd with one D, middle initial G, Hamilton. And the book is called Immigration and the Remaking of Black America.
I have that book. You gonna get me in trouble trying to get me to read, put that on the book club. I got that one too. But I haven't read that one. I haven't, but I read it.
That's a current book. We need to be into that book. I'm just starting it myself, and it's real short, heavy. Dr. Darity is on the back giving it, glowing reviews, and so I thought he wrote the foreword, but he gave the glowing reviews. As I said before, so good night, love you, keep moving, and I talk to you. Hopefully, I can talk with you before the holidays. Peace.
All right, fam, no problem. Appreciate it. Because right now, what am I reading right now? I think I'm reading Uplifting the Race right now. I think that's the name of the book I'm reading right now. So I'm reading Uplifting the Race. I don't know whether or not it's going to be a book club now. I'm just reading it to figure it out. So I'm not going to announce a book club tonight. I don't think Clarence Thomas is going to be our next book club. We might do that at some point out. The immigration book, I haven't started reading it because I'm reading another book right now. And I try not to read too many historical books at the same time. Gets me confused. I'll read a fiction book or something, but I won't read. But we might have to read the immigration book. I've been just sitting there, it's looking at me. I gotta parse through it though and see. Okay, I got you. Okay, now let's keep the calls going. Now listen, we headed into lightning round or something because I got a lot of calls I want to get to everybody because I know people read this book and everybody wants to talk about it. So have your pages ready, have your stuff concise, be ready to go because I'm gonna try to get through at least about 5 callers. Okay, and it's like 10 in there. So I'm going right now to 678. What's your name? Where you calling from? And what you want to talk about with the book? You there, 678? 1, 2. Okay.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, 678. I can hear you. What's going on?
Hi, Yvette. How are you?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. This is Rika. I'm from Decatur, Georgia.
Oh, Rika, you from where? You from home?
Yes,
born and raised.
We can folk.
Born and raised.
Okay. So I know you want to make this quick, so I'll tell you a little bit about my passage and why it's important to me. So I'm a millennial, Yvette.
Okay.
I'm 28.
Okay.
Okay, and I just got exposed to you guys maybe a couple months ago. My older sister, she put me on to you and Tone, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this book club with Yvette.
Ah, good.
Girl, when I read this passage right here.
What page you on?
Okay, hold on. My baby sleeps, so I got the lights off. Hold on, girl. Hold on.
Y'all be quiet.
Okay, so it's page number 167. It's towards the bottom. It's like the 5th or 6th line in that last paragraph.
Okay.
And he's basically talking about the older civil rights movement, right? And I'll just read a little bit to you.
Okay.
So it says, people became conditioned to action in crises, but inaction from day to day. We unconsciously pattern a crisis policy and program and summon support not for daily commitment, but for explosive events alone.
Mm-hmm.
Yvette, if I had not known when this book was written, I would think it was written today.
Yeah.
Like we're only incited when it's something horrendous. Why aren't we active all the time? Like, that blew my mind. Like, I'm a millennial, like I said, so this is new to me. You know, I'm just now learning. You guys are teaching me a lot, but
Thank you.
reading this book, like, it just blew my mind.
We ain't got number. We ain't got number water. We just show up to put out fires.
Like, oh my God, like, it almost makes me feel sad, like, because I can still relate to this so closely today.
Yeah. But see, what we don't realize, fam, is that, like, the purpose of these organizations, too, is supposed to be also to create community. We do this stuff day in and day out.
Right.
I mean, I was joking when I said we only got water. We show up to put out fires. If you ain't got no fire, we taking the water back home. Well, no, I need you to plant a seed. I need you to, do this daily. No, I just got water. You need water or you don't. And so it's kind of like, we don't understand, like, and I see this even with people when they talk about what we gonna do now, what we gotta do tomorrow. I'm gonna show up somewhere. What you want me to do? And it's like, no, we're building something, and the thing that, even if there's nothing to show up to, you have to understand that being a part of the organization, and that's why I said Project Take Back our organizations, is you're building a community and a culture of a politics that matters. And he's right, like he just built that. What we gotta do? What we gotta go? Get the fire truck, Jimmy. Right. Like, no, that's not how you sustain, that's not how you protect your rights and sustain any kind of movement. And he was just like, there's so many points where, like, on here where, like, he was just firing on all cylinders. But you're exactly right.
Yes, girl, it blew my mind. I'm so happy you selected this book. I can't wait for the next one. I missed the conference. I was pissed off about it. I was 38 hot. But the next one, we gonna be there. So
absolutely. Thank you, fam.
I can't wait. I appreciate this. I appreciate you and Tony. Have a good night, okay?
You too. There are a lot of people who kind of really don't understand, like, Yvette, what you mean Project Takeover? What does that mean? Well, because you're not going to, like, we have all of these old institutions. So what happens if you don't go back and take back those institutions in Project Takeover? What happens is that you just leave them to people who are not fit to lead, right? Or you can't sit around and talk. What did King tell you about, doing stuff that feels like it's not effective? It's all about whether or not it's effective or not. It's not effective. What you're doing is not effective. Sitting around talking about NAACP is not an effective way to rebuild and reimagine the institution. It's not effective. They have local branches. Let's get involved. Like, you have to do something that's effective. You have to measure your effectiveness. That's all part of it. So right now I'm going to 510. What's your name? Where you calling from? And let's talk about the book.
Hey, Yvette. It's Anita calling from the Bay Area.
What's going on? What you thinking?
I am the tea cake lady. You enjoyed those cookies?
Those were delicious. Those were delicious cookies.
Thank you.
Thank you. I killed those cookies. I came back to the hotel and I realized that I hadn't ate dinner. I've been so busy I hadn't eaten anything. And those cookies were there and they had some kind of nuts in them and they were delicious. I appreciate you.
They were so I enjoyed this book, and I want to go to page 37. You almost hit it. I was so scared you were going to hit it. So the last paragraph, and it's actually, he's referring to the book before this book, which I also read, which is Why We Can't Wait.
Okay.
So he says, in his struggle for racial justice, the Negro must seek to transform his condition of powerlessness into creative and positive power. One of the most obvious sources of this power is political. In Why We Can't Wait, I wrote at length of the need for Negroes to unite for political action in order to compel the majority to listen. I urge the development of political awareness and strength in the Negro community, the election of blacks to key positions, and the use of the block vote to liberalize the political climate and achieve our just aspirations for freedom and human dignity. So that was one takeaway for me.
Absolutely.
And the other one is page, where did it go? Where he's talking about what is freedom.
And I just lost my page. But as I was reading it, I also thought about, because the beginning of the book for me was powerful. But then when I got toward the end, maybe the middle, toward the end, he just kind of lost me. Like he went off into some, theological, fantastical, like this man was really in a dilemma, and you kind of felt it, like he really did not know where to go from here.
Well, I think
it was almost like we have tried everything, and then the more I read it, the more it seemed like we're still here.
Yeah, I think towards the end. Yeah, I think towards the end he got to this kind of global kind of thing, and that was where I was like, I kind of understood it, but I didn't agree with it. But I hindsight is 2020, I guess. But I thought all the way through though, I think the overwhelming kind of message is like, you got to keep going. Like I think he felt like all the people who were trying to do something other than what he was trying to do, they were well intentioned, but I think he felt like all the stuff that y'all are trying to do is an abdication. Like you trying to go over here, you gonna go over here, and you gonna have black power, and you gonna run Africa, and you gonna do this, and he was like, that ain't gonna do nothing. Like he was just, I think if somebody had showed him like, okay, that's going to be effective, or that is effective, he would have changed his mind. But he was just like, none of that stuff that you're saying is going to work. And it hasn't been a long time that we've been doing this anyway. And enough of y'all haven't showed up anyway. I think, that was a little, he's a minister and all that. So he said it very eloquently, but I kind of felt like there's a little shade in there. Like, who are you to tell me, well, it didn't work, when you weren't even trying to make anything work? You're just talking. And that's what happens. Like, a lot of people just get to talk. Like, a lot of people who even criticizing King weren't even doing anything. Like, well, it didn't work. Well, hell then. What were you doing the whole time? So I think I kind of felt that he was bristling a little bit, but he wouldn't say it because that's not who he was. It's not how he wrote. But I think he was bristling at the criticism in a way, even though he eloquently kind of talked about why.
Exactly. Yeah. And one of the things that because I read like The Dream also, once we called this book, I just went and started reading some of his works. And one of his fears was that as he was meeting with the other political leaders like Stokely and some of the other ones that were maybe meeting a little differently, was that there were people that were coming in at that time, even before he died, that were trying to co-opt the message, and they were trying to co-opt, how he was doing the movement. And so he saw some of that. And so that was one of his fears. I think he alludes to it in The Dream, where people were just kind of sitting around waiting for something to happen to him so they could co-opt it. And we're seeing that like right now, like how they're trying to co-opt even our message.
Yeah, no, I think he saw some of that too. And I think he saw people who weren't really doing anything or achieving anything, just trying to say what he wasn't doing. Just trying to say, well, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. And he was just, I think part of it was pushing back and saying, listen, I've seen your plan and it won't work. And you don't have any fruits to your labor. Like my stuff, I got the president do da-da-da-da, and we did all of this stuff. And it's not perfect, but like we've been doing something and you really kind of haven't. But we want you to be a part of the movement, but like, no, it's not gonna happen this way. And you still kind of feel, let me just say, you still kind of feel, it's not, we talk about King's speech when he says, I've been to the mountaintop, I may not get there with you and all that stuff. But you kind of feel that in this book too, a sense of like, I'm leaving this book because I'm not going to be here. Like you kind of get a sense of like, you get a little premonition in this book. Like I'm plotting a path forward because I'm not going to be here to tell you. And I feel I need to write this right now. And you kind of get that too. And with a person who's made that kind of sacrifice, it's just so much to me that like we still didn't follow the path. Like I understand, like even it's like there's a lot of good stuff in here that we just didn't do.
Yes.
Or we're consistent in doing.
And I want to leave this page 98. It says, "What is freedom? It is first the capacity to deliberate or to weigh alternatives. Shall I be a doctor or a lawyer? Shall I be a Democrat, Republican, or socialist? Shall I be a humanist or a theist? Moment by moment, we go through life engaged in this strange conversation with ourselves. Second, freedom expresses itself in decision. The word decision, like the word incision, involves the image of cutting. Incision means to cut in. Decision means to cut off. When I make a decision, I cut off alternatives and make a choice. The extrementalist say we must choose, that we are choosing animals, and that if we do not choose, we sink into thinghood and the mass mind. A third expression of freedom is responsibility. This is the obligation of the person to respond if he is questioned about his decisions. No one else can respond for him. He alone must respond, for his acts are determined by the totality of his being. And then I'll stop right there. So that's what my takeaway was. I appreciate the book, and I thank you so much.
I thank you too, fam. But let me just say before you go, Antonio's in the chat right now talking about how he ain't getting no cookies. So I just want you to know.
I'm going to send you guys both a carrot box.
Okay. You just be eating stuff. All right, fam. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Guys.
Love you back. I don't know why you miss out. You just miss out. If you miss out on the cookies, you miss out on the cookies. And they were delicious, and I appreciate it. I ate the whole thing in one sitting. I'm going to the next call. I'm going to 347. 347, what's going on?
Hey, Yvette.
Hey.
Hey, it's Shamari. I'm calling from Harlem.
What's going on?
Nothing much. I read the book. I was at the conference, and shout out to you and Tone. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
I appreciate you for everything that you do. It was a pleasure. It was transformative, and I can't even begin to say enough about how I am different because of that conference. So thank you.
Thank you, fam.
So my point is on page 115, and it's about the children, because I saw so many kids at the conference.
The babies.
The performance about reparations. He had so many of the ADOS family that brought their kids, and I have a point about the boomers to kind of tie this all in. But on 115, it says, 100 times I've been asked why we have allowed little children to march in demonstrations, to freeze and suffer in jails, to be exposed to bullets and dynamite. The questions imply that we have revealed a want of family feeling, or a recklessness toward family security. The answer is simple. Our children and our families are maimed a little every day of our lives. If we can end an incessant torture by a single climactic confrontation, the risks are accepted. And that stuck out to me, because one of the things that has transformed for me and for my family are the conversations that we are having about ADOS life and politics. And I was on the phone with my sister and my daddy and my mother the other day, and we were talking about your show, actually. And just very casually, my dad is a boomer. He's 72. I am 40. I'm Gen X. And he just kind of casually mentioned that, he was in one of the protests that happened at the counters in Oklahoma City, where we're from. I'm originally from Oklahoma City. My mother is from Tulsa, Oklahoma. My dad is from Oklahoma City. And so he was a part of that whole movement, like back in the 50s when they were doing the sit-ins at the lunch counters and things. And I'm 40 years old, and this is the first time I'm ever hearing this story. And he said it so casually, like, and we're both sitting there like, wait a minute. Like, Dad, you mean to tell me you were there? And he was like, yeah. And he was telling us how he was like 11 or 12 at the time. And what they would do is, because many of these sit-ins were organized through the churches, and he was a part of the church community, that the Clara Luper, who was one of the civil rights activists in Oklahoma City at the time, she passed about maybe 10 years ago now. But she was a family friend, part of the church, and they would have children go to the counters and to the sit-ins because they felt like people were less likely to be violent against children. And so what they would do is give them, say, 50 cents or so to go and sit at the counter in case they needed to order something. And if they didn't have to order something, or they didn't have to pay whatever they didn't have to spend, then they would keep that money. And so that's how the children were a part of the movement. And so it just struck me how something that critical in his life, because he was a child, he knew it was important, but the magnitude of it kind of slipped him until he was talking to us about it now. And this is what, 50, 60 years later? Yeah. And so these are the kind of stories that kind of get lost in the sauce. And I know we give boomers a hard time. A lot of times we talk about how a lot of them were very individualistic and not about the collective. But I want to shout out to my mom and daddy because they were two.
Yeah, shout out to the people who did the work. You shout out to the people who did the work. No shout out to y'all who talk about marching with King and you were not there. But like you shout out to who did the work. Shout them out.
Yep. So, I want to shout out to the people that did for a family to the point where, when it came time for you to do for your own, you couldn't even really do for your own blood because you had been tapped out trying to do for everybody who came before. And so now, I realize, how all of that stuff is connected, and it has charged me to do my work, to do my job.
Got it, fam. Thank you, fam.
My part of my work is my contribution to the lineage therapy. I'm a therapist by trade, so I'm getting myself ready to contribute in that way.
Oh, that's
wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. No, thank you, fam. That was a great call. I appreciate it. Thank you, fam. I'm gonna try to take a couple more calls. Let's try to keep them quick. I'm gonna try to get in there and try to get a couple more people in. 786. What's your name? Where you calling from? What caught you about the book?
Hey, Yvette, this is Jay from MIA.
What's going on?
Listen. Hey, I love the book. On page 101, my quote is, many of our former supporters will fall by the wayside as the movement presses against financial privilege. Others will withdraw a long-established cultural privileges are threatened. When I look at that, I look at we look at white liberals, but I think to look at all of our the people, the pop crowd, and all of them. You gotta look at them at the same way. Like as we're forming the ADOS identity, you got folks coming in and now withdrawing their long-established, support of us because we're forming this identity. So that's why I get from that quote.
They're walking away.
I want to say.
Okay. Well, thank you, fam. Yeah, that's too much. It's too much. Yeah. Well, we was with you when you just wanted equality, but it's too much. I get it, fam. Thank you. Yeah, that was a good line.
And
it's so many. The thing about it is, appreciate it, fam. It's so many good lines in here. That's part of the thing. 913. I'm coming to you.
Good evening, Yvette. This is Patricia from Texas.
Hey, Patricia.
How you been?
I've been pretty good. I can't complain about nothing.
I know. I heard you last night, and I got my book right here.
Good.
But my eyes are watering because it's time for me to go to sleep.
I know
I just wanted to say that you've already basically went over what I was wanting to talk about on page 158. That was the page I had picked out.
I got you.
And so, yeah, you got me. And so, but I wanted to say that my voice is kind of getting worse because it's time for me to go sleep. This book, it's so, I can just almost hear Martin Luther King's voice because I was in elementary school when they shot him. Mm-hmm. And I can just, it's like reliving it all over again, but instead of it being in the past, he brought it back to the present. I mean, we're actually here. We haven't moved one iota, it feels like.
Yeah.
And we're memorializing him, on his birthday and everything, but we need to be reading what he left us.
Yeah.
I'm trying to rephrase it and not say exactly what the lady before that guy, because she said something I wanted to say too. But instead of memorializing him and, it's Martin Luther King's Day, here it's almost more like a religious, social type of thing, the prayer breakfast at the church and all of that stuff. But I'm the political activist. I'm the one that I basically started a little group off from the NAACP because they weren't really doing, they're not really doing anything. When I joined to see what they were doing and become a part, but they're not as mobile because they don't have a lot of young people. It's the older heads, and they've gotten tired, but they still want to hold it up. It's like, okay, we can't let the NAACP fall down. In fact, Saturday is going to be our 100th year anniversary here.
Okay.
We're doing a banquet, 100 years. But 100 years, we've got to move. I want to see something prominent happen before I leave from here. And I want to thank you so much for being on your post, because, you know, they killed the men, and I pray for you. I put a hedge of protection around you. You go for the gusto as long as you've got energy, and I hope that we make it across that finish line together.
Oh, thank you, fam. I appreciate it. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for that.
If anything I can do, you just let me know.
Oh, I got you. I appreciate it, fam. Thank you so much. Yeah. I mean, okay. These are the sacrifices, and that's the thing. And you know, something else she brought up. Like, I don't think people honor it, but don't honor it. Like, they'll honor it by, like, this is MLK Day. But have you read all the stuff? Have you read all his books? Have you really, like, pondered his works? Like, you know, how much is that to honor somebody if you're not really seriously engaging the work? If you think of him like they used to call him, like, if you think of him like, you know, it's just some sellout or a handkerchief head, do you really understand what he was saying? Do you really understand it? Like, he was standing up. Do you really get it? Like, most of the, like, people think it was just the church. It was all the church. No, like, there was, how many black churches called King a troublemaker back then? Like, he's just, we don't need him here. And, like, you know. So I think that's a great call to end on. And I think absolutely right in terms of the way that we have to move. I don't think we really understand. I think we understand now, but I don't think we really have understood, like, what this looks like. And I don't think we really understood. King has been so whitewashed. I don't think any of us really have understood, like, the extent to which he was calling everybody else out. And you have to have a certain degree of respect. I'll say this again as we end. You have to have a certain degree of respect in terms of how you talk about a person who took a bullet for their people. Like, you know, at a very early age. You have to have a respect for that person, what they did, what they sacrificed, their intellect, and the framework that they laid out. Even if you disagree with it, you can be respectful and you can respectfully disagree. But the way I hear King talked about sometimes is very problematic. It's almost as if you're talking about the whitewash King that America gave us, as opposed to King himself. And if you want to understand King himself, you have to read King. You cannot understand King through the filter of America that now uses him in commercials to sell stuff. That's not the King that you need to understand. And so hopefully, I hope having this show, and I appreciate, thank you so much everybody that called in with your page numbers. I appreciate it. And I hope one of the things that happens, like, with this show, and then we can keep doing, is like King talked about it, building the you gotta have, I brought up the quote, you gotta have a political foundation. It doesn't work to just go out and be active. Well, we're gonna run today. No, what do you know today? Every day you're building, even if it doesn't feel like it. Even if it doesn't feel like, I just read. That's not anything. Or I just read something and I tweeted my local lawmaker about it. That doesn't feel like a lot. But the thing that you have to understand is, when you are building something, it doesn't feel like a lot. Everybody starts out at one whatever. Every expert at anything started out as, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, that's just what it is, and that's just part of the journey. And you have to like begin to appreciate. I talk a lot about appreciating the process, and that doesn't matter what your process is. If this politics or your process is like working out or whatever, you have to appreciate the day you ran, you know, 2 feet more before your lungs gave out, and you just had to walk back to the house. That's part of the process. You just can't be like, I'm just gonna throw the towel in, it ain't working. And so I think what we're beginning to do is understand and appreciate the political process and the political framework and the political giants and intellectual thinkers who came before us. And for that, that's good stuff. That's good work. And fam, I appreciate it. Thank you for showing up for the book club. It is midnight like the other caller. Everybody, y'all got to go to bed, go to sleep, and do all that good stuff. And for those of you who are still here and won't watch tomorrow, so fam, until next time, and I'll be announcing the next book sometime soon. I just gotta sit and think about it, because fam gave me an idea in terms of immigration book. I'm not sure, but I'll have to sit and think with that for a moment and figure out what the next book will be. But it's coming, so just take a breath of air until it comes, and just relax yourself until we get back with it. But before you go, please hit that like button. Please share. Please hit that bell if you have not, to get notifications. And if you haven't subscribed, please hit the subscribe button. I would appreciate it. And until next time, fam, be easy breezy, finish your libations, and go to bed.